name is Kazadi. I'm a final year student in International Relations at African University in Zimbabwe. Welcome to my vlog. I'm going to talk about the growth of African and colonial exploitation. The first point is the growth of Africa. The present investigation on the determinant of growth in Africa is an idea application of a broader research agenda which has developed in recent years. With a landmass bigger than India, China, USA, and Europe combined, with few doubt the scale of the African continent and its resources. However, until recently, only some have seen it the growth market that is fast becoming. With a steadily growing population and linked toward 2 billion in Africa, workforce will be the world's largest by 2040. Equally, with a collective GDP of 2.6 trillion by 2020 and 1 billion for point around 500 new middle-class consumers. Africa as a continent has on average grown its economy by 5% per annum over the last decade. It's already as urbanized as China and as many cities of however of 1 million population as Europe. Clearly, there are many Africans with varied economics, from the oil exported of Nigeria, Angola, Libya, and Algeria, to the already more economics found in Egypt, South Africa, and also in Morocco, particularly in Marrakech. There is a host of nations already with a GDP per capita well over 2,000. There are many countries such Kenya and Tanzania, Ghana, and Cameroon in transition from agriculture and manufacturing to service economics. For years, Africa's growth has been shaped by commodity prices. The continent has a third of the planet's mineral resources, 10% of the world's oil reserves, and produce nearly 70% of the global diamond trade. We can find diamond in Botswana and also in South Africa. And especially around many of Africa's currencies. At least 10 African currencies, for example, lost more than 10% of their value in 2014. Although oil prices are volatile, oil and gas will, however, continue to be an important factor in the future of Africa. Africa will remain an important producer of oil and natural gas, accounting of 10% of global oil and 9% natural gas production in 2035. In a bid to diversify away from resources, several nations have been pushing hard to grow other sectors of economy. To that, manufacturing, service, and tourism in particular have all shown growth, although whether from Ebola in DRC, localist terrorism, or national political change, growth from the latter source of volatility. For example, in Nigeria, it's still very much an oil exporting economy. Its service sector now accounts from 60% of a GDP. And then I'm going to talk about also in Nollywood. Nollywood is now around 3 billion film industry, and it's now the second largest in the world, bigger than Hollywood in America, and just beyond Bollywood in Mumbai in India. Likewise, in Angola, Africa's second largest oil exporter, where fishing, agriculture, and also manufacturing growth now means that a third of government. Angola, Africa's largest oil exporter after Nigeria, of course, where fishing, agriculture, and manufacturing growth now means that a third of government revenue comes from no oil sources. On the back of the success of MPC mobile payments that kicked off in Kenya in 2007, many African states from Nigeria to DRC are seen as world leader in adapting mobile technology and social network platform. I can give an example like Vodacom to deliver potential life-changing new financial platforms. many of which operate across border and so greater transparency and cooperation. Other protect and often niche monopolize other protect are often niche monopolies are being superseded by cooperative mass market platforms from IT enable and most importantly most trust challenger. Although the growth is occurring across several key economies including Nigeria, Ethiopia, Kenya, Ghana, Angola, Mozambique, and also Zambia. There is a little doubt that South Africa continues to be a major driver in the region. And it's the country that many see as economically representative of the continent as a whole, or at least sub-Saharan Africa. However, South Africa is not a proxy for the way that Africa as a whole will pay out. South Africa GDP growth has fluctuated. However, South Africa is not a proxy for the way that Africa as a whole will pay out. South Africa GDP growth has fluctuated and averaged around 2% over the past decade and is likely to continue on a similar trajectory for the next. Other experts see that maybe the focus on the GDP, gross domestic product, growth is only part of the view and one highly dependent on the data that it is. To other regions very poor, they see that other measures are better indicators of the real progress that is taking place in Africa and highlight things such as life expectancy, infant mortality, and energy consumption. As a global life expectancy has averaged of 7 for the last decade in Africa as a whole, major improvement has been seen with a more than 10% rise from 49 to 55. This includes change in countries such as Zimbabwe, where despite economic turmoil, life expectancy has risen from 37 to 46 by 2030. Life expectancy across the continent in Zimbabwe will have climbed to 60 years. At the same time, energy use per capita has grown from 500 kilowatts in 1990 to around 600 kilowatts per capita in 2014. This is a key metric, is not far beyond Asia, but still at only 20% of Europe use. Despite long-standing commercial ties with Europe, Africa now conducts half its trade with the developing economic region, so-called South-South trade. China has the main doubled that its share of trade to 17% over the last decade, and wider connection across Asia, South America, and via the Middle East are all being development. Both India has 6% share of Africa trade and Brazil 3%. Both are expected to grow significantly, and with rising suspicion over China's business practices, take over a chunk of China land grab. Many see the significance of increased intra-Africa trade, bilateral agreements between nations with different political standpoints, but common growth agenda are linking with emergent cross-continent. The growth of trading zones and increased investments in infrastructure. Many African nations remain flawed democracies or authoritarian regimes, but over the next few years, a number of breakaway countries will show economic and political progress, and barriers to trade will be lifted as infrastructure is improved. By in 2030, half of the African population is projected to live in urban environment, and the continent top 18 cities will have a combined consumer spending around 1 trillion. In many African countries, urbanization is boosting productivity, which rise as workers move from agriculture work into urban jobs, demand investment. Half of the region population is under 25 years of age. Each year between 2015 and 2035, there will be 5,000 more 15 years old than the year before. The challenge will be to transform this huge bulge into an opportunity. Africa will doubtless become one of the world's primary crop markets. And the second point of my topic is colonial exploitation. Colonialism, therefore, a very huge. The second point of my topic is colonial exploitation. Colonialism dealt a very huge blow to Africa. The detrimental impact of the scramble and partition of Africa bred long-term socio-economic catastrophe on Africa and its purpose. The evils that were perpetrated by colonialism still speak to the socio-political woes that Africa found herself in the very day. One would be charged for being economics with the truth if they dismiss that Africa's resources help modern day Europe. The development that most countries enjoy in the global north is shared testimony of the results of plunder, pillage, and the clock backward to the Berlin Conference of 1884. At the center of the discussion was how best to rid Africa of its natural endowment. The period of 1884 to 19 period of 1884 to 1914 present that can be construed as an all-out deliberate ploy at awakening Africa for imperial and egocentric gains. Towards the imperialist leaders viewed as the dark continent that need a glamour of light, bar of cancelled mission. What formerly presents itself as an adventure to spread to trade, Christianity, civilization, and commerce was never, but a well choreographed machination that leads to the ultimate underdevelopment of Africa. Colonialism came in different facets and leads to a plethora of human rights abuse. Its implementation was inhuman at best and diabolic of worst. And looking into how colonialism was used to exploit Africa can help us get proper perspective into the nefarious antics imperialism. Now I'm going also to talk about how colonialism as economic conquest tact in Africa. Now I'm going to talk about how colonialism as economic conquest tact in Africa. Colonialism is simply defined as the policy or practice of acquiring full or practical political control over another country, occupying with shelter and exploiting it economically. The end result of colonialism is the advancement of conquering country at the expense of victim country. Colonialism in Africa border on resource extractivity, exploitation of native labor, and plunder of continents' vast raw materials. Colonialism was used as a modus revolution in Britain. Afrocentric historians have been on record stating that the development that Most development countries boast of come from the birthplace of the exploitation of Africa. And also colonialism was also aimed at impairing the development prospect of Africa, since in some instances that African people were subjected to cold blood murder in the name of punishment. It has been recorded that in the former colonial Democratic Republic of Congo, women and children that were perceived to be lazy after failing to complete certain tasks were ruthlessly punished. The punishment include the chopping off, of, of hand and sometimes murder. This greatly impacted on the development of the African human resource as birth rate significantly shrank. And the second point of colonial exploitation is how colonialism changed the style of living in Africa. Due to colonialism, the African style of living was negatively impacted. The traditional concepts such as division of labor according to sex were educated so that African women had to toil in harsh working conditions that were normally understood to be masculine working environments. With colonialism, workload became as one size fits all indoors. Development in the African scenes and past was greatly stunted. And the exploitation of women during the colonial rule was shared by most Eurocentric anthropologists who spearhead anti-African narrative that giving birth was form of abuse. The propaganda and falsehood that come with colonialism often led to loss of African history and instilled inferiority complexity among the natives. This creates a thriving ground for the exploitation of Africa since historical footing often inspired development. I'm going to talk about how the African resource developed Europe, because we know in Africa we have so different types of natural resources. It can be argued that colonialism stimulated a rapid growth of most European economies with our natural resources from Africa. Will the colonial period seem short statistically given the history of human development? It's positive in Europe where a far great gain. Colonialism leads to loss of power and autonomy of the African state. Walter Rodney said in How Europe Under Development Africa highlights that the loss of power by Africa at the instance of colonization had far-reaching consequence. And then on one hand we doubt power. Development it's difficult to implement, and without the development when the powerful deliberate Africa usually lags behind. The use of the stem strength and dependency on coal to lead to hyper extraction of the African resources, including its vast forestry, for example in DRC, in Gabon. Colonial master allocated symmetries of land to the local with the excessive commercial agriculture, exporting cash crops and raw materials to their countries. I'm going to explain how colonialism introduced capitalism to Africa. Colonialism became the vehicle with which capitalism was within the African continent. It creates room for long-term exploitation of Africa that is still felt to date and coach a negotialism and neoliberalism. And colonialism destructed the political smooth flow that prevailed in most African states. Its implementation includes the installation of puppet rules who partner with 10 men in the primitive accumulation of wealth. Post-independence, those imposed rural land made concessions to companies from former colonial master to continue doing business to date. For example, in Congo, foreigners from Belgium are still doing their companies in DRC, and they are also invest. In those companies apply neoliberal approach to employment and those perpetuating the exploitation of the African human capital. The last point of my topic is colonialism and commercial empires. Colonialism leads to the exploitation of African mineral resources. It markets the broadening to the commercial scope for companies owned by the colonial master. In South Africa, prominent imperialists such Cecil Rhodes and Charles Rhodes exercised ruthless extractivism in the land. The exploitation mission was to swift out enormous volumes of gold and diamond were extracted at the shortest possible time. The need to find the second range in the neighboring countries of South Africa became a push factor for the colonialism of the then Southern Rhodesia, now modern, it's now in Zimbabwe. In the Metabeland area in Zimbabwe, colonialism led to massive exodus of local cattle being shipped to Britain for the commercial beef industry. That colonialism led to the exploitation of Africa in all the four corners of development, be it the social, economic, or political. In my conclusion, we are African and we are believing in a future Africa one day. We are trying even after and before colonialism, we are going to make it a future in Africa. Thank you. Thank you guys. Don't forget to share the link and like and comment. See